Imagine being dragged into chaos just because you had the audacity to say one simple word. No. That's all it took. One refusal, one boundary, and suddenly I had a screaming Karen dialing 911, trying to paint me as some sort of criminal mastermind. The absurdity of it all still blows my mind, but it's exactly what happened when I told her I wouldn't be paying for her son's college tuition. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? Wrong. That's just where the nightmare began. And by the time it was over, Karen had no idea that her attempt to ruin me would explode in her own face in a way she never saw coming. Before I dive into the insanity, let me set the stage. I'm not some billionaire lounging around on a yacht, but I've done pretty well for myself. I grew up in a working-class family, busted my back through school, and built a comfortable career. I own my home outright, have a decent savings cushion, and I live relatively simply. I don't flaunt wealth, but compared to some of my extended family and neighbors, I'm considered the rich one. That label alone has caused me more headaches than I can count because people love to project their financial woes onto anyone who seems to be doing even slightly better. And, in this case, the biggest leech of all turned out to be Karen. Karen isn't even a close relative. She's my cousin's wife's sister. You know, the type of family connection where you barely even know each other. But somehow, she acts like you owe her everything. She's in her early 40s, perpetually miserable, and carries herself like she's the queen of the neighborhood. She has this entitled air about her, always talking down to people, always demanding special treatment, and constantly fishing for handouts while pretending she's above it all. If there was ever a walking stereotype of a Karen, she fit it perfectly. Our interactions had always been awkward but tolerable, until one afternoon when Karen cornered me at a family cookout. She had this rehearsed little speech about how her son had been accepted into a private university, how it was his dream, and how they were so proud. The only catch, they couldn't afford the tuition. Then she launched into this spiel about how family helps family, and how since I was doing so well, I should step up and cover the bill. At first, I laughed, thinking it was a bad joke, but when I saw the intensity in her eyes, the expectation dripping from her tone, I realized she was dead serious. She wanted me, someone barely connected to her family tree, to fork over tens of thousands of dollars for her son's education. I told her no, not politely, not apologetically, just no, because frankly, it wasn't my responsibility. That's when I saw the mask slip. Karen's smile froze, her jaw tightened, and she tilted her head like she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. Then came the barrage of guilt trips. She accused me of being selfish, said I had more money than I could ever spend, and claimed that if I refused, I was essentially destroying her son's future. She even tried to paint it as some sort of moral obligation, like I'd be a bad person if I didn't cave. I held firm. Every time she tried to twist the knife, I just repeated the same word. No. It was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Her voice rose, people started to glance over, and soon she was practically shouting across the yard about how I was a greedy, heartless snake. I wanted to walk away, but she blocked my path and just kept going. Finally, my uncle stepped in, pulled her aside, and the situation fizzled. For the moment. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no. She was just getting started. Over the next few weeks, she launched a campaign of harassment. She'd show up at my door just to talk, always with some sob story. She sent long, rambling texts late at night reminding me of how much her son looked up to me. She even tried to get mutual relatives to pressure me spinning lies about how I'd promised to help, and then cruelly backed out. Each time, I stayed consistent. No. But the more I refused, the more unhinged she became. The final straw came one evening when she stormed up to my house uninvited. I was in the middle of dinner when I heard the pounding on my front door. I opened it a crack, and there she was, hair frazzled, eyes blazing, like a woman possessed. She launched into another tirade, demanding I write a check on the spot. When I told her, again, no, she did something I'll never forget. She pulled out her phone and right there on my porch dialed 911. My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She started screaming into the phone, telling the operator that I had threatened her, that I was holding her against her will, and that she feared for her life. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. Fake tears, shaky voice, the whole 9 yards. Within minutes, red and blue lights flashed outside my house. 2 officers showed up, and Karen immediately ran toward them, sobbing and pointing at me like I was some violent criminal. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. I tried to explain, but the officers separated us and took statements. The humiliation of having neighbors peek through blinds, watching me being questioned on my own lawn, is something I'll never forget. But here's the thing about pathological liars. They always overplay their hand. As Karen spun her web of lies, she slipped up. She claimed I'd locked her inside my house, but the officers had arrived to find her standing outside on the porch, phone in hand. She claimed I'd threatened her life, but couldn't describe how or when. She said I'd grabbed her, but there wasn't a mark on her. The officers saw through it pretty quickly. After a tense half-hour of questions, they turned their attention to Karen. Her crocodile tears dried up fast when they started pressing her for details. She stammered, contradicted herself, and eventually one of the officers sighed and told her flat out that making false reports was a serious crime. Watching the color drain from her face was the most satisfying moment I'd had in weeks. They issued her a citation, warned her that she could face criminal charges if she ever pulled a stunt like that again, and sent her on her way. Meanwhile, I stood there, shaken but relieved, as the cops apologized for the inconvenience. That should have been the end of it. But I couldn't just let it slide. She had tried to ruin my reputation, tried to drag me through the mud, and for what? Because I didn't want to bankroll her kid's education? No, she needed to learn a lesson. So I started documenting everything. Every text, every voicemail, every visit. I set up a security camera on my porch to capture her antics. And sure enough, she couldn't help herself. She kept showing up, ranting, demanding money, sometimes even at midnight. The footage I collected painted a crystal-clear picture of harassment. Finally, I took it all to a lawyer. Within weeks, I had a restraining order filed against her. The look on her face when she was served, absolutely priceless. She tried to argue, of course, yelling that I was ruining her family, but the evidence was undeniable. She was ordered to stay away from me, my property, and to cease all contact immediately. Word spread through the family like wildfire. At first, some relatives were shocked. How could I do that to poor Karen? But then I showed them the evidence. Once they saw the videos, once they read the texts, their sympathy evaporated. Slowly but surely, her support system crumbled. The woman who had once strutted around like a queen bee found herself isolated, avoided, and whispered about. And the cherry on top? Her son, this golden child she'd been so desperate to send to a private university, ended up dropping out after a semester. Turns out Karen had been so consumed with trying to squeeze money out of me that she'd neglected to handle the financial aid process properly. No grants, no scholarships, and when she couldn't keep up with the tuition bills herself, her son was forced to leave. The same dream she'd tried to manipulate me into funding collapsed in her hands, all because of her greed. Looking back, I don't regret a thing. Saying no was the best decision I ever made. Karen thought she could bully me into submission, but all she did was destroy her own credibility. And I'll admit, watching karma unravel her carefully constructed lies was deeply, deeply satisfying. If you've ever dealt with a person like Karen, someone who thinks the world owes them everything, you know how intoxicating it feels to finally stand your ground. They thrive on intimidation, but the second you shine a light on their behavior, they crumble. That's exactly what happened here. So, to Karen, wherever she is now, thank you. Thank you for reminding me that boundaries are worth protecting. Thank you for teaching me that no matter how loudly someone screams, the truth always speaks louder. And thank you for proving, once and for all, that karma doesn't need any help. It just needs time. And to everyone listening, if this story gave you chills, hit that like button, share your own revenge tales in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Because trust me, you haven't heard the last of stories where karma comes knocking, and the people who deserve it the most are the first to get burned.